The desert doesn't lie. It strips everything down, the pretense, the pride, the careful masks people wear in civilized towns. Out here, under a sky so wide it feels like God's own eye staring down, you find out fast what a person is truly made of. And on the morning of June 14, 1883, in the dust-choked territory of New Mexico, a man named Cole Mercer found out exactly what he was made of, and he didn't entirely like what he discovered. He was standing over a body. Not his first. Probably not his last. But this one was different, because the man at his boots had been his best friend for 11 years, and the gun that killed him was still warm in Cole's hand. Behind him, a woman spoke. Her voice was low and steady, the kind of voice that doesn't rise even when the world is on fire. "You didn't have a choice," she said. Cole didn't turn around. His jaw worked. His eyes stayed fixed on the face of his dead friend, a face that still wore an expression of surprise, as if death itself had seemed unlikely. "There's always a choice," Cole said. "I just made the wrong one for 11 years. The woman stepped beside him. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't crying. She looked at the body the same way she looked at everything, directly, without flinching, as if the world owed her nothing and she'd decided long ago to collect anyway. Her name was Ada Voss. And before this story is finished, you will understand why men feared her, why one man loved her, and why an entire territory would burn before she let herself be anything less than free. But we need to start 3 weeks earlier. Before the body. Before the betrayal. Before Cole Mercer understood what it meant to love a woman who refused to be saved. 3 weeks earlier, Redstone Flats, New Mexico Territory. The town of Redstone Flats had exactly 3 things going for it. A saloon that stayed open until someone got shot. A sheriff who stayed inside until the shooting stopped. And a water trough out front of the general store that the horses used more than the people did. It wasn't a town so much as a pause, a temporary hesitation between long stretches of nothing, where people stopped because they had to and left because they remembered they had somewhere better to be. Cole Mercer had been here 6 weeks. He sat on the porch of the Dusty Crown Saloon each morning with a cup of coffee so strong it tasted like regret, watching the road that came in from the east like he was waiting for something. He didn't know what. A job, maybe? A reason. In his better moments, he told himself he was just resting. In his honest moments, and Cole Mercer was an occasionally honest man, he admitted he was hiding. He was 34 years old, lean and weathered, with hands that had done work he wasn't proud of and eyes that had seen things he couldn't unsee. He'd ridden with a cattle outfit for 5 years, worked as a range detective for 3, and spent the last 2 doing jobs that didn't have clean names and polite company. Not a killer exactly. But not far from it. The morning Ada Voss rode into Redstone Flats, Cole almost missed her. He was watching a lizard on the porch rail, genuinely fascinated. Which told you something about the quality of local entertainment, when the sound of a single horse broke through the morning stillness. Not the clatter of a stage or the thunder of a group. Just one horse, moving at a deliberate walk, unhurried and unapologetic. He looked up. She came in from the east, which meant she'd been riding through open desert since before sunup. The horse was a dark bay mare, well-muscled and road-wise, the kind of animal that had been chosen carefully rather than inherited accidentally. The woman on its back sat straight, not the rigid straightness of someone trying to impress, but the natural ease of someone who'd spent so many hours in the saddle that it had simply become her natural state of being. She wore trail clothes. A long canvas duster the color of pale sand. Dark trousers. Boots that had actual miles on them. A hat pulled low enough to keep the sun honest. She had a rifle scabbard on the left side of the saddle and a pistol on her right hip, worn like it belonged there, not like it was being displayed. Cole set down his coffee. In Redstone Flats, single women didn't ride in alone. They came with husbands, with families, with wagon trains, with someone else's protection wrapped around them like a shawl. They didn't come alone, armed and unhurried, scanning the street with calm, measuring eyes like they were doing an inventory and hadn't decided yet if the town made the cut. She stopped at the water trough. Let the mare drink. Didn't look at anyone in particular, but Cole had the distinct impression that she'd already catalogued every person on the street, including him, and filed them accordingly. She dismounted with the smooth economy of movement that comes from genuine competence. No drama, no hesitation, no request for help that never came anyway. A man named Drucker pushed off from the wall of the general store and moved toward her. Drucker was one of those men who existed in every frontier town like a recurring bad dream, thick-shouldered, small-eyed, wearing confidence like a badly fitted coat. He'd been running minor errands for a man named Harlan Veck for 2 years and had mistaken proximity to real power for the possession of it. "Ma'am," Drucker said, positioning himself between her and the store entrance. "You lost?" Ada Voss looked at him. Not through him. Not around him. Directly at him, with the patient, steady gaze of someone who has heard every variation of this particular conversation and found it tiresome every single time. "No," she said simply. Drucker smiled, which was the wrong response. "Women don't usually ride and solo out this way. It ain't safe." He let the word safe do its work, let it carry its implied threat like a calling card. "I appreciate your concern," Ada said, in a tone that expressed no appreciation whatsoever. She moved to step around him. Drucker's hand came up to touch her arm. What happened next was so fast that Cole nearly missed it despite watching directly. Her hand caught his wrist. A precise, controlled motion. She applied pressure at an angle Cole recognized from men who'd learned fighting from necessity rather than sport. Drucker's face went through surprise, confusion, and pain in rapid succession. He made a short, undignified sound. "Don't," Ada said quietly. She released him. Walked past. Pushed through the door of the general store without looking back. Drucker stood there cradling his wrist, staring at the door as if it had personally insulted him. Cole picked up his coffee. He wasn't smiling exactly. But something in his expression had shifted, the mild, habitual boredom cracking open to reveal something that might have been, for the first time in a very long while, genuine interest. He didn't know her name yet. Didn't know her story, her destination, her history, the weight of what she carried. Didn't know about the warrant in 3 territories or the man who'd put it there, or the particular and terrible reason she'd come to Redstone Flats specifically. He just knew that she'd walked into a dusty, nowhere town like she owned the air in it. And something inside Cole Mercer, something he'd assumed was broken past fixing, stirred awake. The general store smelled like flour, old wood, and the particular kind of quiet that settles when people stop pretending to be busy. Cole didn't follow her in immediately. He gave it 10 minutes, enough time to avoid being obvious, not enough time to be cowardly about his curiosity. He told himself he needed tobacco. This was partially true. When he pushed through the door, she was at the far counter, speaking to the storekeeper in a low, businesslike voice. Her back was to him, but she'd heard the door. He was certain of it. The slight adjustment in her posture said so. He moved to the tobacco section, which conveniently required him to pass within 6 feet of her. He heard her ask for ammunition, .44 caliber, 2 boxes, and dried provisions for what sounded like a week's travel. She wasn't staying long. She was stocking up for somewhere else. He took his time selecting tobacco he didn't particularly need. "You're going to hurt yourself doing that," she said. He looked up. She was watching him in the small mirror behind the counter, an oval of polished tin that gave back a murky, compressed reflection of the whole store. Their eyes met in it. "Doing what?" Cole asked. "Trying to figure me out without looking directly at me." She turned. Up close, she was perhaps 28, with a face that the sun had touched honestly, fine lines at the corners of her eyes, a quality of directness that felt almost physical. "It's rude. And you're bad at subtle." Cole almost laughed. It surprised him. Cole Mercer. he said, extending a hand. She looked at it for a moment, then shook it. Her grip was firm and brief, the handshake of someone who'd decided long ago not to perform femininity for anyone's comfort. Ada Voss. You've been through here before? No. But you came here direct. You knew the town. Something moved in her expression, the faintest acknowledgement that he wasn't as slow as he might look. I know a man who uses this town, she said carefully. Or he did. I need to find out if he still does. What man? That's a personal matter. Cole nodded slowly. The fellow outside, Drucker. He runs errands for Harlan Veck. Her expression didn't change. But her stillness changed quality. The difference between the stillness of someone relaxed and the stillness of someone who has just become very, very alert. Is that relevant? She asked. Probably, Cole said. Since Veck owns half this town and the other half is afraid of him, and you just hurt one of his boys in front of witnesses. He paused. Not judging. Drucker needed hurting. But Veck will hear about it before sundown. Ada looked at him steadily. You know Veck. I've had dealings. What kind? Cole was quiet for a moment. He'd worked for Veck once, briefly, 2 years back, range detective work that had turned into something dirtier than advertised. He'd left when a family of homesteaders got caught in the middle of what was supposed to be a simple land dispute. He told himself leaving was enough. He'd been wrong, and he knew it, and it sat in him like a stone he couldn't digest. The kind I'm not proud of, he said. Ada studied him. She had a way of looking at a person that felt less like reading a face and more like reading a history, scanning past the surface for the substance underneath. You're not working for him now? She asked. No. But you know his operation. His people. Where he keeps himself. Cole felt the shape of the conversation shift. He understood, suddenly, that this wasn't small talk. That she was calculating, not cynically, but practically. She was a woman traveling alone in hostile territory, arriving in a town controlled by someone she clearly had reason to oppose. She was deciding, rapidly and intelligently, whether he was a resource or a threat. You want to tell me what he did? Cole asked. No, she said. Then, after a pause, my sister. 2 years ago. Veck had a man in Laredo who ran a boarding house. It was a trap for women passing through without protection. Her voice remained level, but something moved beneath it like a current under ice. She was 17. She didn't make it out. The store felt smaller suddenly. The storekeeper had found extremely compelling reasons to be in the back room. Cole said nothing for a moment. There was nothing small enough to say. I've been tracing the network for 18 months. Ada continued. Veck is the top. Not the boarding house operator. He was the operator's money. His protection. I have documentation. Enough to hang him, if I can get it to the right federal marshal. She looked at Cole with that same steady, measuring directness. But first I need to confirm where he keeps his records, because the documentation I have alone won't be sufficient. The judge in Santa Fe is in his pocket. And Drucker would have known you were coming now. Cole said slowly. Yes. So you have tonight. Maybe less. Yes. Cole set the tobacco down on the counter. He looked at Ada Voss, this woman who had ridden alone across open desert, who had broken a man's wrist without raising her voice, who spoke about the worst thing that had ever happened to her in the same steady tone she'd used to describe weather. He thought about that family of homesteaders. He thought about the 2 years he'd spent being a good man about everything except the things that mattered. I know where Veck keeps his records, Cole said. Ada's eyes didn't widen. She didn't gasp. She simply nodded, with the focused calm of someone receiving information they'd hoped for but hadn't counted on. Then we need to talk, she said. Outside, the desert sat in its vast, patient silence. And in the distance, somewhere beyond the eastern hills, the dust of approaching riders had begun to rise. They didn't talk in the store. Ada's instincts were too good for that. She moved them out the back door without ceremony, through the narrow alley behind the building, and into the small livery stable at the end of the lot where her mare was now housed. She did this efficiently and without explaining, and Cole followed because her reasoning was already clear. Drucker had eyes watching, and a conversation that mattered needed walls that didn't have ears growing through them. The livery was dim and smelled of hay and horse sweat. An old man named Toby dozed in the corner on a three-legged stool, and Ada evaluated him in a single glance before deciding he was harmless. Cole knew Toby. He'd have agreed with that assessment. They sat on hay bales across from each other and Cole talked. He laid it out plainly, the way a man talks when he's decided that the truth is more useful than self-protection. He described working for Vec in 1881, 2 years back, riding as one of 4 range detectives brought in to pressure homesteaders off land Vec wanted for a cattle corridor. He described how the work had been framed as legal enforcement, and how it became obvious, progressively and then all at once, that there was nothing legal about any of it. He described the family, a man named Garrett Holt, his wife, 2 boys under 10, whose house he'd stood in front of while 2 of Vec's actual hired killers gave them 48 hours to leave everything they owned. He described driving away. He didn't describe it with self-pity, and he didn't ask for absolution. He stated it the way you state a fact that doesn't get better from being examined too long. He drove away. "The Holts left," he said. "I don't know where they went. I quit Vec's payroll 2 days later. Told myself it wasn't my business. Told myself there wasn't anything I could do anyway." He stopped. Both of those were lies. Ada listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because you need to know what kind of man you'd be relying on. And what kind is that? One who was a coward once when it cost someone else and not him." Cole held her gaze. "I won't be again." Ada looked at him for a long moment. That measuring quality again, not suspicious exactly, but deeply careful, the careful of someone who has trusted incorrectly before and paid for it in ways that don't heal cleanly. "Vec keeps his records where?" she finally asked. "He has a ranch house 14 miles south, the Crescent Bar. Legitimate cattle operation as a front. But there's an office in the main house, interior room, no windows. He keeps ledgers, correspondence, contracts with operators in 3 territories." Cole paused. "And a strong box with enough paper to ruin 12 men beside himself, which is why none of them have ever moved against him. He's everyone's insurance policy, and everyone's threat at the same time. A deputy federal marshal named Reyes out of Albuquerque is the one man in the territory Vec doesn't own," Ada said. "I've been corresponding with him for 4 months. If I can get those records to Reyes, it ends. All of it. Getting to the Crescent Bar won't be the problem," Cole said. "Getting out will be. There's always a way out." "Not always." She looked at him steadily. "I didn't come this far to be stopped by probability." Something in the way she said it, not bravado, not recklessness, but genuine, bone-deep resolve, struck Cole in a way he hadn't anticipated. He'd known brave men. He'd known men who were brave because they didn't properly calculate the danger. Ada wasn't like that. She knew exactly what she was walking into. She'd known for 18 months. She'd done it anyway, every single day, one careful step closer to the man who had destroyed her family. That wasn't recklessness. That was something else entirely. Something Cole didn't have a clean word for. "Vec's got 9 men at the Crescent Bar regular," Cole said. 6 are working cowboys. 3 are not. The 3 I'm concerned about. One of them is a man named Doyle." Cole paused. "We rode together for 3 years before Vec. He was a friend." The word came out oddly imprecise, like a boot that no longer fit right. "He stayed when I left." Ada's eyes were direct. "Can he be turned?" "I don't know." Cole found this admission harder than the others. "A year ago I'd have said yes. Now I genuinely don't know what he's become. Then we plan without him. We need a distraction. Something that draws the men away from the main house long enough to reach the office. Vec himself will be in town tonight. He's got a meeting at the Dusty Crown, Thursday regular, but he'll have at least 2 men at the house. Doyle? Likely. Ada was quiet for a moment, working through something. What about you? Vec knows your face. If he sees you in town tonight, he'll know something's happening. That, Cole said carefully, is actually useful. Vec will assume I'm here for work. He's offered me jobs twice since I left. He doesn't understand why I turned them down. He thinks money changes minds because it's changed his. Cole leaned forward slightly. I can sit at his Thursday meeting. Keep him in the saloon. Keep him from riding back to the Crescent Bar. While I go to the ranch. While we go to the ranch. I said I'd help. I didn't say I'd sit in a saloon while you just said you'd sit in the saloon. Ada interrupted, with perfect logic. Cole stopped. Recognized he'd contradicted himself in the span of 4 sentences. I'll find a way to do both. For the first time since she'd ridden into Redstone Flats, something shifted in Ada's expression. It wasn't a smile exactly. It was something quieter, a brief, careful warmth, like a lantern behind glass. You're stubborn, she said. I've been told. So am I. I know, Cole said. That's not a problem. Outside, the sound of horses drifted through the livery wall. Cole counted hooves without looking, for horses, moving with the purposeful rhythm of men who had somewhere specific to be rather than passing through. He and Ada both went still. The horses stopped outside the livery. The men outside weren't subtle about it. Cole heard boots hit the ground. 3 sets. He heard Drucker's voice, recognizable by its particular mixture of grievance and self-importance, telling someone that the woman had gone somewhere around back. He heard a second voice, deeper and quieter, that Cole recognized the way you recognize a sound from your past, immediately, in your chest, before your mind has fully caught up. Doyle. Cole was on his feet before he'd consciously decided to stand. Ada had also risen, positioning herself beside the mare's stall with a natural smoothness that kept the horse between herself and the livery entrance. Her hand rested near her pistol without being on it, the posture of someone managing a threat rather than escalating one. Cole stepped to the livery door and opened it before the men outside could. Doyle was standing 3 feet away. 11 years collapsed into a strange, compressed moment. Cole had last seen Tom Doyle 18 months ago, passing on a trail outside Tucson, a brief, awkward exchange of nods between men who had too much history and too many current complications to have a real conversation. Doyle had looked the same then. He looked different now. Not older exactly. Harder. The kind of hard that comes from making choices you can't unmake until they're simply who you are. He had 2 men behind him. Not Drucker. Drucker had apparently delivered his intelligence and retreated to nurse his wrist and his dignity. 2 men Cole didn't recognize, lean, watchful, wearing the flat expressions of professional violence. Cole, Doyle said. His voice was unchanged. That was the worst part somehow. Tom. Didn't know you were in town. Been here a few weeks. Doyle's eyes went past Cole's shoulder into the livery. Cole didn't move. He kept his body easy, non-confrontational, the stance of a man having an ordinary conversation in the middle of an ordinary day. Woman came through, Doyle said. Drucker says she hurt him. Drucker put his hand where it wasn't wanted, Cole said. She corrected that. Sounds fair to me. Vec wants to know who she is. I don't know who she is. Doyle looked at him. A long, steady look, the look of a man who had spent years reading people and knew exactly what deliberate vagueness sounded like. Cole. His voice dropped, the crowd noise of the situation falling away. Don't. I'm not doing anything, Tom. You're standing in a livery doorway blocking my view like you practiced it. Doyle's jaw tightened. You always were too loyal to strangers. It was a quality. It's going to get you killed. Has come close before. Cole agreed pleasantly. The two men behind Doyle had fanned slightly, positioning themselves at angles. Not yet openly threatening. But the geometry of it was clear, the casual preparatory movement of men who expect to need options shortly. Cole didn't look at them directly. He kept his attention on Doyle. Harlan's got business in town tonight, Doyle said. Whatever you're planning, whatever she's planning, it isn't worth it. Ride out, Cole. Both of you. I won't stop you. This surprised Cole. He let it show. You'd let her go? I'm telling you to ride out. Doyle's voice was carefully neutral. I'm not telling you anything else. Something complicated moved through Cole. He'd ridden Doyle off, not vindicatively, but practically. Written him off as someone who'd made his permanent choice and would stand on the wrong side of it until the end. But this was something else. This was a man offering a warning inside language that allowed him to deny it later. This was a man caught somewhere in the middle of himself. I can't ride out, Cole said quietly. You know why. Doyle's expression hardened. I know why you think you can't. That's different. Is it? A long silence. Behind Doyle, one of the hired men shifted his weight. The creak of a holster leather was distinctly audible. She's got some kind of documentation? Doyle said, so quietly it was almost not a question. Cole said nothing. If she's got documentation on Harlan. Doyle stopped. Something crossed his face that Cole hadn't seen there in a long time. Something that looked like the ghost of the man he'd known at 30, before the compromises calcified into character. It won't matter, he said finally. Not here. Not with the connections he's got. Marshal Reyes, Albuquerque. Cole said, equally quiet. Doyle was absolutely still for a moment. Get out of this town, Doyle said. His voice had changed, stripped of the official performative quality. This was just Tom. The Tom who'd once pulled Cole out of a flooded river in Kansas and never mentioned it again afterward because that was how he was about things that mattered. Get out tonight. Before the meeting ends. He turned. Gestured to the two men. They moved with him, back toward the street. At the livery entrance, Doyle paused without turning back. Cole. A pause. The east pasture fence at the Crescent Bar. The gate latch broke last month. Doyle hasn't fixed it yet. Another pause. Nobody has. He walked away. Cole stood in the doorway, watching him go, with the feeling of holding something fragile and irreplaceable that he hadn't known was still intact. Behind him, Ada appeared at his shoulder. He just told you how to get in, she said. He just told me how to get in, Cole confirmed. Why? Cole thought about it for a moment. Thought about what a man becomes when he spends years walking away from himself one small step at a time. And whether there is some core that doesn't erode regardless, some original thing that survives even when almost everything else has been surrendered. Because he was a good man once, Cole said. And good men don't disappear. They just get buried. He looked at the sky. Afternoon was tilting toward evening. We've got 4 hours, he said. Let's use them. They rode out at dusk. Not together. Ada went first, taking the southern trail on her bay mare, keeping to the arroyos where the terrain carved natural shadows. Cole followed 20 minutes behind on his own horse, a buckskin gelding named after no one and asked to do very little that was specifically unreasonable. Until tonight. The Crescent Bar sat in a shallow valley between two ridges, and at dusk it looked almost peaceful, lamplight in the windows, cattle moving in the distant pasture. Smoke rising from the cookhouse in the thin, honest column of working ranch life. It was a convincing picture. Harlan Veck was good at convincing pictures. That was how he'd operated for 15 years without a serious legal challenge. Everything looked like something it wasn't, right up until it was too late to look away. Cole found Ada in the tree line on the western ridge. She tied the mare and moved on foot to a natural overlook between two boulders. When Cole crouched beside her, she handed him a small folding telescope without comment. He looked. 2 men on the main house porch. One at the bunkhouse door, a working cowhand, not a gunman, based on posture. A light in the office window at the northeast corner of the house. Vec himself was at the Dusty Crown, where Cole had confirmed his presence via a deliberate and unremarkable ride through town before heading south. 2 on the porch are the problem, Cole said, handing the telescope back. Agreed. Ada studied the scene. If one of them goes to the bunkhouse, meal time, shift change, the other is manageable. Or, Cole said, there's a bell on the east pasture fence gate. Vec put it there 2 years back for cattle theft warning. If something trips it, both men go to investigate. Both men go to investigate. Cole looked at her. You're faster inside. You know what you're looking for. You're better with men who might need persuading. Ada returned with a directness that wasn't criticism. Just assessment. The bell, Cole said. 15 minutes should be enough. 10, Ada said. I don't need 15. She said it without arrogance, and Cole believed her. He'd watched her work all day, economical, purposeful, nothing wasted. She would take exactly as long as required and not 1 second more. They split. Cole circled east in a wide arc, staying low, moving with the careful patience of a man who'd done enough questionable things at night to know exactly how sound carries in still air. He reached the east pasture fence in 12 minutes. Found the gate. Found the bell, a simple iron assembly, functional and crude, exactly as described. He waited. Counted 2 minutes. Pulled the cord. The bell rang out across the night, sharp, clean, cutting through the desert quiet like a blade. He moved immediately, circling back west. By the time he reached the tree line, both porch men were moving toward the east pasture, hands on their guns, moving with the focused urgency of men who took their responsibilities seriously. Cole watched them pass 50 feet below him and felt a complicated gratitude toward Vec's sense of security protocol. He moved down toward the house. The front door was unlocked, another piece of Vec's particular arrogance, the arrogance of a man who never genuinely expected anyone to come for him on his own ground. Cole pushed through, moved through a front room furnished with the expensive tastelessness of new money, and found the interior corridor that led to the northeast corner. The office door was locked. Ada was already there. She was working a thin pick through the mechanism with the concentrated focus of someone doing delicate surgery. Cole watched the corridor while she worked, listening for returning boots. 18 seconds. The lock gave. Ada pushed through. The room was small and windowless, exactly as Cole remembered, a desk, a bookcase, and against the rear wall, a steel strongbox bolted to the floor. Ada went for the bookcase first, scanning spines with practiced speed, pulling specific ledgers and holding them to the lamplight with the efficient certainty of someone who knew exactly what she was looking for because she'd spent 18 months learning. Third ledger red cover, she said quietly. This is the operating accounts. Payments to the boarding house operators. Payments from. She moved to the desk. Opened drawers with measured speed. Found a locked compartment, had it open in 11 seconds. Pulled out a bundle of correspondence, scanned the top letter. Letters to the judge in Santa Fe. These alone. She stopped. Her voice had changed, just slightly, just at the edges. These alone convict 4 men besides Vec. Strongbox, Cole said. Give me 2 minutes. Cole stood at the door, listening. The ranch had gone quiet in the way that things go quiet when attention is focused elsewhere. But 2 minutes was a long time. Ada worked the strongbox with something she produced from her coat, not a pick but a small key. Cole glanced at her. What did you get? I've been planning this for 18 months, she said without looking up. I know a man who worked here 2 years ago and kept a copy of everything valuable when he left. The box opened. Inside, more ledgers, folded documents, and a sealed letter that Ada picked up and looked at for a long moment before placing carefully with the rest. She assembled her collection with rapid, practiced efficiency, folding everything into a flat document case she'd worn against her back under the duster. The whole process had taken 4 minutes and 30 seconds. They moved back through the house. At the front door, Cole stopped her with one hand. Listened. Boots on the porch. One set. Coming back early. One of the porch men had already returned. Cole looked at Ada. Ada looked at Cole. A fast, wordless exchange, the kind that requires either very long acquaintance or very particular circumstances to achieve. Cole reached a decision and stepped forward. He opened the front door and walked out onto the porch like he owned it. The man on the steps, one of the two he'd watched, young, wide-shouldered, a face not entirely committed to the cruelty it was trying to project, stopped dead. Cole said, with the complete and terrible calm of a man who has run out of good options and decided bad ones work fine. Harlan asked me to pick something up from the office. A pause the length of a held breath. Then Ada's elbow connected with the base of the man's skull from behind. And he went down in a way that suggested he'd wake up with a severe headache and a revised understanding of situational awareness. They were moving before he hit the boards. The horses were where they'd left them. The night swallowed them whole. Behind them, a shout from the east pasture said the second man had arrived back at the house. They rode hard and didn't look back. They pushed north through the night, riding with the quiet urgency of people who've done the irreversible thing and are now simply managing its consequences. The desert moved around them in its dark, indifferent immensity, the stars overhead burning with a clarity that felt almost cruel, too beautiful for the circumstances, too permanent for the moment. They didn't stop until they reached a shallow canyon Cole knew, 3 miles north of Redstone Flats, where a spring-fed pool made the air softer and the ground moss dark and strange against the sand. They let the horses drink. Ada sat on a flat rock and opened the document case, checking the contents by moonlight with the systematic focus of someone verifying a result they're almost afraid to believe. Cole stood nearby and watched the southern approach for followers. Nothing yet. But Vec would know within the hour that something had been taken, and a man like Harlan Vec didn't absorb theft quietly. "It's all here," Ada said. Her voice was different now. Not emotional exactly, but stripped of something. The careful professional armor slightly lowered, just for a moment, in the private aftermath of the thing she'd been building toward for a year and a half. Cole sat down on the rock beside her. Not too close. Just close enough that the solitude wasn't absolute. "Race," Cole said. "How do we get these to him? Wire out of Magdalena first thing." "I've got a protocol with him. Coded message, meeting point. He comes with federal authority, and we transfer documentation with him as legal witness." She paused. 48 hours. Maybe less if he moves fast. Vec will move in 12. I know. He'll send men to every road out of this territory. I know that too. She looked at him. He'll also send men to find you specifically. You were seen in town today. Drucker knows your name, knows Doyle spoke to you. A pause. You don't have to come to Magdalena. You could ride east. Vec's reach doesn't extend past the territory line. Cole was quiet for a moment. I helped because it was right, he said. Not because it was safe. Finishing it is the same thing. Ada looked at him in that direct, measuring way, but this time something was different in it. The measurement wasn't for utility or risk assessment. It was something more personal and more complicated. You don't know me, she said. I know enough. You know what I told you today. That's usually more than people show. She was quiet. The spring murmured. Somewhere far out in the dark, a coyote called and was answered. I'm not. She started. Stopped. Started again. I've been alone with this for a long time. The way you have to be alone with something this size. It changes how you move through the world. I don't trust easily. I don't need protection. I don't. She stopped again, and something in the stoppage was more revealing than what she'd said. I know, Cole said simply. I'm not like other women. The statement was flat and factual, not defiant, not requesting anything. Just true. Cole looked at her. At the moonlight on her face. At the case of documents in her hands that represented 18 months of solitary, relentless pursuit of something that most people would have called impossible. At the stillness in her that wasn't coldness, he understood that clearly now, but was instead the particular stillness of someone who has learned to carry a great deal without showing the weight. He smiled. It was small and genuine and a little crooked. I know, he said again. That's why. She looked at him. Why what? That's why I'd like to know you longer. He held her gaze. A lot longer. A silence passed between them, not empty but full, the way silences are full when both people in them are thinking genuinely rather than performing composure. You should know I'll probably argue with you about everything, Ada said finally. I'll probably be wrong about half of it. At least. Fair. Another silence. Softer now. Then boots on stone, too many, too fast, and Cole was on his feet with his gun drawn before the thought was fully formed. 4 riders came into the canyon from the south. Not Vex men. Cole recognized the lead rider at 50 feet in the moonlight, Doyle. Behind him, the 2 hired men from the livery. And behind them, a 4th figure Cole didn't recognize. Cole kept his gun up. Doyle pulled his horse up 10 feet out and raised both hands open, palms forward, the old signal. The one they'd used between themselves years ago when riding into uncertain situations. The gesture had a grammar specific to them, worked out in the field over years, and meant, I'm here clean. No threat. Cole didn't lower the gun. But he didn't shoot. Vec knows, Doyle said. He got a rider from the ranch 20 minutes ago. He's coming with 6 men. How far behind you? Ada asked. She was on her feet, case secured, hand on her pistol, completely composed. Maybe 20 minutes. He's mounted better than I rode. Doyle looked at Cole directly. The 2 boys with me, they're done with Vec. They'd been looking for a moment to leave for 6 months, and this is it. He hesitated. The 4th man is the Holt family. Garrett Holt. He's been in Magdalena 2 years. He knew you were coming and he rode to meet you. Cole turned and looked at the 4th rider properly for the first time. A man of perhaps 40, lean and weather-worn, with the eyes of someone who has rebuilt something from rubble and knows exactly how heavy every brick was. Garrett Holt looked at Cole for a long moment. You left, Holt said. Not accusing. Just a fact. Yes, Cole said. You came back. Late, Cole said. I know. Holt looked at him for another moment. Then nodded. Once. Short. The nod of a man who understands that forgiveness and accounting can occupy the same space without canceling each other out. I can get you to Magdalena, Holt said. I know every back trail in this territory. Cole looked at Ada. Ada looked at the document case in her hands. At the riders. At the dark southern sky where, in the far distance, the first suggestion of rising dust was just barely visible. Then we ride, she said. They rode. 20 minutes later, on a narrow back trail that wound through canyon country Vex men didn't know, Cole came up alongside Ada in the dark. You were right, he said. About what? There's always a way out. She glanced at him. In the moonlight, in the movement, there was something on her face that was close to the thing he'd call happiness if she'd let it be called that yet. Told you, she said. And they rode on, through the dark and the dust, toward the first pale suggestion of dawn beginning to crack the eastern horizon, toward Magdalena, toward justice. Toward whatever came next for a woman who refused to be anything less than free and a man who'd finally figured out what was worth being. The documents reached Deputy Marshal Reyes in Albuquerque at noon the following day. Harlan Beck was arrested 48 hours later at a hotel in Santa Fe where he'd gone believing he could outrun what was coming. He couldn't. The documents were complete. The correspondence with the judge was devastating. The ledgers traced 15 years of criminal financing through 6 territories. 23 men were eventually indicted. Beck died in a federal prison in 1887, 4 years later, of pneumonia. He died angry, which was probably the only honest thing he ever did. Tom Doyle testified for the prosecution in exchange for immunity. He left the territory afterward and was heard of later running a small horse operation in Colorado. Cole got a letter from him once, 3 years on. It said, "I'm trying." 3 words. Cole wrote back, "That's enough." Garrett Holt and his family built a small cattle operation outside Magdalena that still stands, according to people who know the territory. His wife planted a kitchen garden. His boys grew up. Cole Mercer and Ada Voss stayed in Magdalena for 2 weeks while the federal case assembled itself around the documentation she'd spent 18 months gathering. They argued about almost everything, as advertised. Cole was wrong about a reasonable portion of it. On the last night before they needed to decide where to go next, Ada sat on the steps of the boarding house where they'd been staying and looked at the sky for a long time. Cole sat beside her. "What do you do now?" he asked. "With all of it, when there's no next thing to find." Ada was quiet for a long time. When she answered, her voice was the same as it had always been, steady, direct, built on something that didn't need approval to stand. "I find out what I wanted before I only wanted this," she said. "I think I forgot for a while. I think I confused purpose with living." Cole nodded slowly. "Where does that start?" he asked. Ada looked at him. That look, measuring, direct, carrying all the history of a woman who had learned to trust her own judgment above everything else because everything else had failed her, that look, which he'd come to understand was not coldness but its opposite, the look of someone protecting something they couldn't afford to lose. She looked at him. And something in it relaxed, just slightly, just at the edges, like a fist slowly, carefully, deciding to become a hand. "Somewhere I haven't been before," she said. "With someone worth arguing with." Cole smiled. Not the small, crooked smile from the canyon. Something fuller. "I have suggestions," he said. "I bet you do," she said. "You'll probably be wrong about half of them. At least," he said. And the desert night settled around them, vast and indifferent and somehow, for a moment, exactly right. The desert doesn't lie. It showed Cole Mercer what he was made of, and gave him the chance, finally, to be made of something better. It showed Ada Voss that the hardest kind of courage isn't the courage to fight. It's the courage to stop, to set down the weapon you've carried so long it's shaped your hands, and allow someone to sit beside you in the dark without reaching for it. She was not like other women. And that was never the problem. That was always, from the very first morning she rode into a dusty, nowhere town like she owned the air in it, that was always exactly the point. The strongest people aren't the ones who never need anyone. They're the ones who need the right person, and are brave enough to know it.